morning, and welcome to Morning Movie News, where the forecast for the Marvel Cinematic Universe is looking more and more like Civil War. The latest bit of evidence is the official synopsis that was released yesterday by Marvel Studios, which was surprisingly telling, and we're going to discuss that in just a moment. But I would like to just take a moment to note how exciting it is to see the Marvel Studios PR machine finally begin to rev up. As you might recall from my Comic-Con 2014 coverage, I felt that Marvel Studios dropped the ball when it came to getting hype beyond Hall H. Now, to be totally fair, a lot of people who were in Hall H said that it was a great live experience, but again, Marvel just didn't sell beyond that. They, I think, failed to get a lot of hype out of Comic-Con. Now, it was a little bit of a moot point because just a week later, Guardians of the Galaxy became a huge moment in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, a very exciting development for the studio and for comic book movies in general, and the Marvel Cinematic Universe. So that was a nice recovery, and I think that as the Avengers hype machine begins to come to life, thankfully, we're going to just forget about what happened at Comic-Con, and it just speaks to maybe Comic-Con not being quite as important an event as it once was, because Marvel makes their own schedule, and they've decided that now is when the hype is going to begin for Avengers 2 Age of Ultron. Perhaps they wanted to let Guardians of the Galaxy breathe, and now having just dropped out of the #1 spot after a really impressive run, as we discussed on Movie Math yesterday, Marvel feels now it's time to switch the focus to Avengers Age of Ultron. Very exciting. I would suspect that they're going to have a trailer out sometime in the holiday season, this coming holiday season, probably in front of Big Hero 6 to make sure you go and see Big Hero 6, and then expect that to play in front of The Hobbit, Battle of the Five Armies, all those big movies that'll be hitting theaters for the rest of the holiday movie season, because Avengers Age of Ultron will kick off summer 2015. All right, so let's talk about this synopsis. Now, just the other week, I made a video, it stemmed from a suggestion actually one of you posed, BTT viewer Frank, and I talked about what he said and then some other research I'd done about all the evidence pointing to a civil war in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. So if you want to check out that video, it had some pretty heavy spoilers, or potential spoilers, because of course none of this is confirmed. So you can check that out via the link at the end of this video. But let's talk about this official synopsis from the mouth of Kevin Feige, or whoever he hired to write this. It says, Marvel Studios presents Avengers Age of Ultron, the epic follow-up to the biggest superhero movie of all time. It's true. You can't fault them for that, at least box office-wise. I know quite a few DC fans would say, taste-wise, that's not the case. So anyway, it continues saying, when Tony Stark tries to jumpstart a dormant peacekeeping program, actually one of you sent in an email to me just last night saying that because of the synopsis, maybe it's that Hank Pym still does create Ultron, the Ultron intelligence, and Tony Stark is the one that wakes it up. So that's a very interesting theory, and would keep things being, with the classic origins of the Marvel Comics, which is a formula that's worked quite well for Marvel so far, being faithful to the source material. Look what happened when they changed things up with the Mandarin. They're probably very reluctant to do that again. So they continue saying, so Tony Stark tries to jumpstart a dormant peacekeeping program, meaning it already exists. So Michael Douglas's character, of course, is supposed to be a contemporary, his Hank Pym, of Howard Stark, Tony's father. So it says, things go awry, and Earth's mighty, of course they go awry, of Earth's mightiest heroes, including Iron Man, Captain America, Thor, the Incredible Hulk, Black Widow, and Hawkeye. And they are put to the ultimate test as the fate of the planet hangs in the balance. Okay, that we know. When does it not hang in the balance? When the Avengers are assembled. Then, as the villainous Ultron emerges, it is up to the Avengers to stop him from enacting his terrible plans. And I like how these synopses often read like a children's novel. It's very funny. And soon, uneasy alliances and unexpected action pave the way for an epic and unique global adventure. And I think that's the very interesting thing here with uneasy alliances. What does that mean? Does it mean a breaking apart for Civil War? Or perhaps, well, I would say maybe, like usually when you hear uneasy alliances in the comic book world, it means heroes and villains will team up against the greater threat. But since Marvel doesn't really have any villains, I don't think that's going to be the case necessarily, unless Loki comes in once again to save the day. He's like, wow, I should just be a member already. You guys keep using me for your adventures. So that's a very interesting situation. So I think the two things coming out of this are the dormant peacekeeping program, that it already exists and Tony does not create it, And then I also think that the thing about uneasy alliances means perhaps a division of the team, and that's what makes it uneasy. Like, it's pretty awkward about, you're going to offend Cap or Iron Man depending on which direction you go. And there's one other thing I wanted to point out before I clarify. If you want the full picture, go to that video, but I just want to clarify the timeline a little bit because it seems some people were a little confused coming out of the video that I made about a potential civil war. But anyway, they talk about the cast, and we all know about this. They say Samuel L. Jackson and Colby Smulders' Maria Hill will be there. So why wasn't he on that poster, right? Everybody said, oh, Nick Fury won't show up, that's why he's not there. Well, it says here he's going to show up. And then it talks about, of course, so it's our original team, our two S.H.I.E.L.D. representatives, the new people, Elizabeth Olsen and Aaron Taylor Johnson as the Maximoffs. But then it says, and meet an old friend in a new form when Paul Bettany becomes Vision. I know I think for a lot of us, we've pretty clearly guessed that Jarvis is going to get a body and become the Vision. But some people have said, no, Ultron creates Vision from scratch. Paul Bettany just happens to be playing both characters. I think this settles it once and for all. The Jarvis AI is going to get its own body. Ultron might be the one who gives it to him, which would make sense with the history of the two characters, but it's going to be Jarvis. They've already changed Jarvis by making him an AI, so I think this is totally fair game. And of course, he was created by Tony Stark. And so Paul Bettany has provided that voice, and he's going to now step into this role as the Vision as Jarvis gets a serious upgrade. And he might very well be evil at first, or pretend to be evil, or supposed to be evil, as Ultron intends in the comics. But of course, as we all know, he's going to eventually become an Avenger. All right, so I think this is all very interesting, and this is how I think that the timeline is going to work for the Marvel Cinematic Universe. Now, some people say, Grace, how can you have a civil war with the fact that Thanos has not been properly explored? Now, Kevin Feige has made it very clear that Thanos is going to be the big bad in Avengers 3, like the video game boss-level villain. So that means he's not going to really come into effect. He might pop his head into the Marvel Cinematic Universe at large beforehand, but he's not going to become a major threat until Avengers 3. And I would actually suspect him to become more of an emerging threat during Guardians of the Galaxy 2, which of course is supposed to hit theaters before Avengers 3, which that date for Avengers 3 hasn't been officially announced, but Guardians of the Galaxy sequel has. So expect Thanos to pick up there. And I think it's very smart to see him coming from the cosmic films. That gives the cosmic films something to do, and it reminds you that they are going to tie into the MCU at large eventually. And, I wouldn't be surprised if they were to show up in Avengers 3, especially not only because of Thanos, but of how much money their movie is making. So that's all very interesting. So I think that before we get to Avengers 3, we're going to have the Civil War. And that was part of Frank's theory about that Phase 3 is potentially very long, that Avengers 3 won't hit until 2019, giving you, a 4-year, basically 4 to 4.5 year Phase 3 of films for the Civil War to play out. I explain it in further detail over in that video, but I think that's likely what's going to happen. You're going to have the Marvel Civil War play out for the next few years. Thanos' threat will develop off on the side in the Guardians of the Galaxy sequel. Maybe if they announce any like an Inhumans film, Thanos might pop up there, of course, and then you'll see him come into the Marvel Cinematic Universe as a whole with Avengers 3 in 2019. That's very far away. Josh Brolin is like, I'm going to be playing this role for a long time, and I'm curious to know, if this slow burn is, you think, something that Marvel can maintain. But I think that Warner Brothers is doing quite a good job keeping people interested. It makes headlines every day in a film that opens in 2016. All right, so that's the first story of the day, and I'm very curious to what you guys think of the synopsis. It got a lot of attention last night when it was released, and people are very excited about the Avengers Age of Ultron. Now, speaking of another team of heroes, yesterday, I'm not sure when this came out, but one of you, let's see, I gotta bring it up here. Where did it go? Hold on. All right, so Senior Safe, BTT viewer, pointed out to me that for the eagle-eyed Dreamworks Animation fan, here it is, you can get your first look at Boo, the Bureau of Otherworldly Operations. And I have to say, this really took me by surprise. I was not expecting them to look like this, and I'm curious as to whether or not this is the young version of these characters, because if you go and you look at the credits for the film, Seth Rogen voices its star, Agent Jackson Moss, but there is someone credited as playing or voicing young Jackson Moss. So unless we're talking really young Jackson Moss, Although, are these characters supposed to be super young, as one of them does have a goatee? Or maybe that's young Jackson Moss on the top, and he grows up to be this kid with this adult or semi-adult with the goatee on the bottom. It's a very interesting structure here. Now, at first I was like, the female moviegoer in me said, what? Why is the female character the only one who's not actually there? She's just some illustration that these guys have drawn. But then I was like, is Melissa McCarthy voicing that character? That would be an interesting choice for her. But then I looked at the synopsis for the film, and it said that Jackson Moss has an oddball partner named Watts. And I was like, well, that guy in the glasses looks like an oddball to me. But then I saw that Melissa McCarthy voices Watts. And I looked a little closer, and you'll see there's some pretty serious eyelashes on this little oddball, literally, with glasses, with the little spherical uniform and this helmet that she is wearing. So I think that looks like a fun character, and kudos to Melissa McCarthy for doing something fun and unexpected. Whereas, you would expect, as I did, that the female character would look like the one in the middle there. So very interesting situation. So the more that I look at it, I do think that the guy on top is perhaps the younger version of the guy with the goatee, but putting them on the same poster then with another character who isn't aged in either direction, maybe that's her grown up, but the nose is totally different on the drawing than it is on the glasses, the woman or girl with glasses. Who knows what age these characters are, while the nose on these two male characters looks very, very similar. And even the little smirk. So the more I look at it, the more that's what I think we have going on here. Seth Rogen, by the way, of course his animated character would have a goatee, voices this character down with the pencil. But this is very interesting. This isn't what I was expecting for Boo, the Bureau of BU is the short for Bureau. Boo, the Bureau of Otherworldly Investigations. I wasn't expecting this. I thought it was going to be a team of supernatural characters fighting other supernatural characters. This is a surprising development to me, and it looks like instead of more of a horror-esque film that had some superhero elements, this looks more like a superhero film that has some horror elements. It's clear two different directions to go, and what's the emphasis on? And I'm surprised that it seems that the emphasis is on superheroes. I guess this is like now a superhero Ghostbusters, whereas I was thinking more Hotel Transylvania with a little maybe Get Smart mixed in. I'm curious to what you guys think. What were you expecting for Boo, the Bureau of Otherworldly Operations? And do you think this is a good direction for Dreamworks Animation to go in? And of course, if they are a superhero team, it's similar to what Disney is doing over with Big Hero 6. And which team seems more appealing to you? Right now, I'm Big Hero 6 to me because I just like the design of those characters a little bit more. These seem, as I said, oddly both they're like a man-child and a woman-child, and I just find that it's hard for me to wrap my head around it. But I do have a lot of faith in Dreamworks Animation's creative team. It's just their PR department that sucks. So very curious about this, and I want to thank again Senior Safe, who, by the way, has the cutest Pikachu wearing sunglasses avatar, which always gets my attention, and I would like to thank Senior Safe for pointing this out to me. All right, so for the third story for the day, talk about generational changes. It looks like Obi-Wan is the top contender for getting one of those first Star Wars solo films. And why is this? I think it's a great choice, by the way. I like Obi-Wan, but he's never been super popular. Until now. Yes, thanks to the Clone Wars series, where he's a major main character, even though Alec Guinness didn't enjoy Star Wars and his contribution to the film franchise, an iconic film franchise, I really liked his portrayal quite a bit. And I really liked Ewan McGregor's portrayal of him in the prequels. And I thought that he was okay in the Clone Wars. He was very Ewan McGregor-y, basically. He was an animated version of Ewan McGregor, although someone else did his voice. But anyway, the reason that I'm saying that he has become super popular is because the official Star Wars site did a poll. And they said, who is the most popular Star Wars character? Who's your favorite, etc. Some kind of wording like that. And of course, there are so many to choose from. Han Solo, the previous most popular character, Darth Vader, Boba Fett, Yoda. I assume Princess Leia was on there somewhere, but of course she didn't really register at all, and nobody expected her to. So I do hope with these new movies, I have high hopes for Lupita Nyong'o and Gwendolyn Christie. I don't know very much about Daisy Ridley, but I'm hoping she seems very much of the Princess Leia, Natalie Portman, Queen Amidala vibe, and those characters. I think I'd like to see some female characters that are a little bit different this time around, instead of just another redux of the same character. Generationally, I'm like, personalities change from generation to generation. The father does contribute some personality, and any kid of Han Solo's, I think, is going to not be totally like Queen Amidala and Princess Leia. So, but anyway, I digress. So they did this poll, and Obi-Wan beat all of these other characters. And everybody's guessing that's, all of the fans who, didn't grow up on the Clone Wars. We're talking about you have to be pretty young when that show was on to really, take it at face value and not to have a good, strong memory of the original films, which people easily are accessible and have won over fans long after they played in the theaters originally and even after the re-releases. But anyway, you're seeing a shifting of the fan base, and I think this is very interesting, and it might be one of the reasons that it's so hard to get a grip on Star Wars excitement, because you have the prequels have like an unexpected effect of dividing your fandom. You have your diehard fans and your purists who like the classic films that were put out by George Lucas back in the 70s and early 80s. And then you have this new group of fans who are like, you guys are crazy. The prequels are awesome. I love them. And they're not only are they divided in their allegiances, but in what they want the Star Wars universe to be in terms of tone and style. So it's a very interesting problem, and we'll see if J.J. Abrams can maybe marry the two. That might be a really successful film for him if he can just accomplish that. Bring everybody back together. So an Obi-Wan film. He's now suddenly very popular, which I think is a great development because, as I said, I've always enjoyed Obi-Wan Kenobi, and I really like Ewan McGregor quite a bit. I think he's an actor who's matured fantastically on the silver screen as to where he's his most likable version of himself yet. I've really become a huge Ewan McGregor fan over the years, whereas I didn't like him so much at the beginning. Although if you go back and look at old gems of his, like The Island, opposite Scarlett Johansson for Michael Bay, he's a very good actor. And he said that he would be willing and happy to return to the Star Wars films. And I think that he would be a great choice. I wouldn't recast the role yet again, especially since Ewan McGregor still lives. So and is very capable of doing the action sequences that would be required for an Obi-Wan Kenobi movie. Now, who would be directing this? The two choices would be Gareth Edwards, of course, from Godzilla, although that would mean Obi-Wan would either die in the first 30 minutes of the movie, or you'd only see him for about 10 minutes. If you haven't seen the honest trailer for Godzilla, by the way, lately, it came out, I think, a week or so ago. It's hilarious and spot on, so I would go and check that out. So that's one option. Or Josh Trank, who did Chronicle and now the upcoming Fantastic Four, he could be doing the Obi-Wan movie. Now, if somebody just makes sure that Gareth Edwards shows Obi-Wan Kenobi and picks up his pacing problems, I think that's the real problem for Gareth Edwards as a filmmaker, his pacing, and that he takes the Spielberg stare a little too seriously. Spielberg is, of course, famous for his reaction shots, whereas Gareth Edwards, I feel, is infamous for them. But if he can, tone it down a little bit, he would be my pick for the director of an Obi-Wan film. I think Josh Trank is a little too gritty for that. I think he would be a better choice for a Boba Fett film or something. He's a little bit too found footage, I think, in his style. And I think you can see that aesthetic being applied to what we hear about the Fantastic Four movie that's coming up. But I think Gareth Edwards is a student of Lucas and Spielberg. He's very much inspired by them. And I think he'd do a really good job with an Obi-Wan film. And I think he has a potential to do some really great epic action sequences, because I thought a lot of the cinematography and setups of the shots and the angles and the production design that Gareth Edwards oversaw, all of that, of course, came together quite nicely in Godzilla. So I'm curious to what you guys think. Do you agree that Obi-Wan has become the most popular character in the Star Wars cinematic universe? Actually, they've made it just one now, and they really jettisoned a lot of the previous storytelling that's been going on in so many different corners of the Star Wars universe as a whole, to make just this one that you'll see play out on screen, and potentially on the small screen as well. You have the Star Wars Rebels show coming up. But is Obi-Wan, has he surpassed Han Solo as the most popular character? Very interesting development. Although, now that I think about it, it would have to be a prequel as well if you did an Obi-Wan film, or maybe Obi-Wan's ghost will walk around, and then you'll have to, of course, recast because Alec Guinness can't play it. It's very weird. This is, having just occurred to me. Let me ask you this. These spin-off films, do they need to be moving the plot forward, or are you okay if we continue to jump around in time? Is that something that you're cool with, considering the prequels kind of established that as a pattern for Star Wars? Or are you like, no, let's just move forward, literally? All right, so let's go into the question of the day. This comes from, appropriately, Musical Cat, who was asked a musical question. And Musical Cat says, "Hi, Grace. Question. I've been watching your show for a few months now. Welcome. And I've learned a lot about the movie industry. So happy to hear it. This is my first time asking a question, so I hope you have time to answer it." I do have time. Musical Cat continues saying, "This has actually turned into a two-part question, so the first part is, who are your favorite movie composers and why? John Williams and Michael Giacchino are my favorites because they create memorable themes that weave throughout the entire movie and are able to compose music for both action scenes and soft, quiet moments. I also love Hans Zimmer, Alan Silvestri, and James Horner. Also, what is the composer's schedule for a movie? Does the music get written before, during, or after the movie is complete? Thanks again, and keep up the great work, Mary. Smiley face. Well, thank you, Mary, aka Musical Cat, for your question. All right, part one. Interesting. I think John Williams is, of course, an iconic composer. Worked on so many of the great films of everybody's on everybody's list, and of course that's thanks to his teaming up with Steven Spielberg so many times, and of course getting that Harry Potter gig with Chris Columbus. But I was watching Hook the other day on Netflix. I just decided to watch it. I really enjoyed the London parts, but I thought it got a little off the rails when they went to Neverland. But overall, I think it held up pretty well. And of course, Robin Williams was fantastic, as was Dustin Hoffman, as was the kid who played the son. It's too bad that he decided not to continue with his career. But anyway, that's a whole nother story. So anyway, I was listening to the John Williams music, and I was like, this sounds so Jurassic Park. It sounds so Harry Potter. And I think that John Williams perhaps doesn't have enough variation to his work, although the Star Wars, of course he did that as well. Star Wars is very distinct, and I think that Superman is very distinct, but some of this fantasy stuff he's been doing, like Hook and, as I said, Harry Potter, has a similarity to it. Also Home Alone, all this stuff, he's like only got one grab bag for the family movie. Although I think arguably these are all family movies. But anyway, that's my problem with John Williams right now. A little too repetitive. But my choice, Mary, is also Michael Giacchino. If those of you not familiar with Michael Giacchino's work, you probably are familiar with it. He just hasn't been very good at getting his name out there, like John Williams or Hans Zimmer. Michael Giacchino is a very big Pixar composer. He did The Incredibles. He also went and did Star Trek, Lost, and he also has a lot of really great gigs coming up, like Jurassic World, Jupiter Ascending, which actually makes me a little more excited for the film now that I know he's on board doing the music, and Tomorrowland, the Brad Bird film with Damon Lindelof. Lost and Pixar come together, and Michael Giacchino sticks around. For that film, of course, coming out next year from Disney about, it's very secretive, but it, of course, I think focuses around their Tomorrowland area of their theme parks. But anyway, the reason I like Michael Giacchino, and the score I want to use as an example for why I like him, is from Dawn of the Planet of the Apes. I agree with Mary that he does a great job doing the action and the quiet moments in the film. But one of the things I like most about his soundtrack for Dawn of the Planet of the Apes is that he incorporated a 60s feel to it. And he's done that quite well with, for instance, The Incredibles. This isn't something that's new to him, but I thought it was quite clever to apply it to a film that originated back in the 60s and to kind of make it seem like an organic score, even though this new film was being made today. It tied them together in that sense, whereas, not just thematically in terms of this is, part of the overall story that's told from that original franchise, but it just, it reaches back and it's a nice nod to the origins of the franchise. I thought it was really smart. I think it really helped create the vibe of the film, and it was very unique. Even though I said he's done it before, I think it felt unique with Dawn of the Planet of the Apes, and that was one of my favorite elements of the film, along with, of course, Serkis's performance. So that's my answer to your first question. If I had to pick somebody, I would say Michael Giacchino. Now, as for the process of scoring a film, now of course it takes a very long time to make a movie, and post-production can take a long time, but of course I don't think the composer can just get started right then. So my guess would be, I don't know a lot about film composing, so I take everything here with a grain of salt. But from what I can tell from, my coverage, while I've been doing this show and when I look into scores myself and I look at these behind-the-scenes documentaries, etc., is that you see that there are themes, like there'll be like, for instance, I don't know, off the top of my head, Leia's theme. This is what plays for Leia, etc. You'll notice for these big movies, characters will have a theme. Or there'll be a theme to the overall movie. Of course, you can really recognize the Star Wars theme. You can almost immediately, the Superman theme, almost immediately, Jurassic Park, almost immediately. So I would suspect that the composer works on that in advance, perhaps even while the film is shooting, and kind of decides what the sound of the film will be, the tone. As I said, Michael Giacchino very expertly put in the 60s element. He probably decided on that in advance and experimented with what he wanted to do. But as for scoring the actual film, I don't believe that can be done in full. You can't really lock it down until the picture is locked down, because so often you'll see that the score will highlight a cut or a certain moment, and I think it would be almost impossible to edit around a piece of music. I mean, it can be done, just look at a lot of YouTube montage clips, but I think it's disrespectful to the editor to some degree. I mean, unless there's a really great piece of music that's been done in advance, I think that probably you have a lot of groundwork laid, you have some overall themes maybe put together, you have the theme song, maybe the few chords that are going to define the soundtrack, and then the composer comes in and lays that all down once they have a locked or pretty close to locked version of the film. And of course, you've seen all those famous shots of the composers directing or conducting is the right term, conducting their orchestras as the film plays behind them so they can get those moments just right. So also, you know what, let's reach back a little bit into the past, and I'd also like to give a shout out to Bernard Herrmann, a really important composer back in his day, and of course responsible for Psycho, and I believe North by Northwest, some amazing soundtracks for Alfred Hitchcock films, and Bernard Herrmann is quite talented. He also did A Touch of Evil for Orson Welles, and that's a fantastic soundtrack as well. I love soundtracks. By the way, if you're a writer at all, soundtracks are a great choice for listening to while you write because they have no lyrics to distract you. My recommendations for soundtracks to listen to when you write are, and I would pick something that has a tone similar to what you're writing, but I really like Dr. Zhivago and I really like Blade Runner. All right, thank you so much for your question, Mary. I hope you liked my answer. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in today. Write down below what you think of today's top 3 stories, the viewer question, anything you'd like to see covered tomorrow, and any questions that you might have. Thanks for watching.